And this is the Weekend Jazz Update with Stan Silva. On this week's episode, one of the greatest songwriters of the 20th century, as well as a very talented pianist, Mose Allison. He was a great pianist in the boogie-woogie and bebop genre, and his compositions were highly acclaimed, many of them jazz and blues themed songs. His compositions, with their witty irony and clever wordplay, have been recorded by countless artists from Leon Russell to Bonnie Raitt and a lot more. He was born in Mississippi and learned piano playing at a young age. He started out practicing tunes he heard on the local jukebox. He then began writing his own songs. He started out playing in nightclubs across the southeast and west, blending Delta blues with modern jazz piano innovations of John Lewis, Thelonious Monk, and Al Haig. His debut album, Backcountry Suite, met with critical success, a compilation of original compositions and jazz classics. In the years to come, his albums like I Don't Worry About a Thing, Wild Man on the Loose, and I've Been Doing Some Thinking won him wide acclaim as a songwriter and pianist. He was also a prolific songwriter. Some of his best compositions included It Didn't Turn Out That Way, Young Man Blues, and Your Molecular Structure. He also toured extensively. At one point, he was performing 200 shows per year in clubs and theaters. He went on to influence several other musicians of his time, from the Rolling Stones to J.J. Cale. He was inducted into the Long Island Music Hall of Fame in 2006. So that was some insight into the life and times and best hits of Mose Allison. More details coming up. Also coming up, some trending festival and album news. Stay tuned to the Weekend Jazz Update with Stan Silva to find out more. We'll be right back after some music. And this is the Weekend Jazz Update with Stan Silva. On this week's episode of the Jazz Update, Mose Allison, a legendary singer, songwriter, and pianist. During this hour, we're going to be talking about his biography. So Mose Allison was born on November 11, 1927. He went on to influence several other musicians of his time, from the Rolling Stones to J.J. Cale. He was also inducted into the Long Island Music Hall of Fame in 2006. He started out studying the piano and trumpet in high school. He graduated from the University of Mississippi with a BA in English and Philosophy. He then served for a while in the US Army and moved to New York City, where he launched his musical career. He was first inspired to take up blues and jazz after listening to Louis Jordan music. Some of his other early influences included Fats Waller, Nat King Cole, and Louis Armstrong. His first love was trumpet playing, then he switched to piano a few years later. One of the massive influences on his songwriting was Percy Mayfield, who people have called the poet laureate of the blues. Allison's first professional gig was in Los Angeles in 1950. Shortly after he moved to New York City, he started out recording under the Prestige label. His first album was recorded alongside Al Cohn and Bobby Brookmeyer in 1956. He would tour and perform alongside them. He also had some big hits performing alongside saxophonist Stan Getz. He recorded some outstanding albums for Prestige Records like Backcountry Suite in 1957, Young Man Mose in 1958, and Seventh Son in 1959. He then signed up with Atlantic Records, following which he recorded under the Columbia record label. Allison had a vast discography, and many of his albums contained classics by him. From 1957 to 1976, he averaged an album per year until his final album for Atlantic Records, Your Mind Is on Vacation. After retiring from music for a period of 6 years, he signed up with Blue Note and Capitol Records. He debuted on that label with the album Ever Since the World Ended. Some of his best albums for the label included My Backyard, released in 1992, and The Earth Wants You, released in 1994. By that time, he'd made a name for himself both as a great boogie-woogie style pianist and a songwriter. Some of his best compositions included It Didn't Turn Out That Way, Young Man Blues, and Your Molecular Structure. He also toured extensively. At one point, he was performing 200 shows per year in clubs and theaters. His music went on to inspire countless other musicians after him, like the Rolling Stones, John Mayall, and more. In later years, Van Morrison released an album of his best songs titled Tell Me Something, The Songs of Mose Allison. In 2006, Mose Allison was inducted into the Long Island Music Hall of Fame. So that was some insight into the biography of Mose Allison, and this is the Weekend Jazz Update with Stan Silva. And this is the Weekend Jazz Update with Stan Silva. On this week's episode, Mose Allison, his life and times and best hits. Now it's time for some trending album news. Grammy-winning producer Alex Sino and Global Music Award winner Terry Heimat are announcing the release of a single from one of their long-awaited albums, Funky Sonatas. The track's a beautiful combination of Latin rhythms and classical music. The name of the single is Tema di Maria. So Funky Sonatas is due for release in April 25, and this album is a compilation of some great compositions from artists like Chick Corea, Louis Bacalov, and more. The single, Tema Maria, is centered around the haunting story of a woman called Maria who lived in Argentina. Her life and story is deeply interwoven with the tango culture of that city. Collaborating on this track are a stellar lineup of musicians. There's Richard Bravo on percussion and drums. Richard's a multiple Grammy Award-winning artist. There's acclaimed bassist Jerry Bravo, whose bass lines provide a beautiful foundation to the track. There's trumpet virtuoso David Pastor, who's known for his expressiveness and lyrical brilliance. His trumpet playing adds a vibrant and soulful element to the music. So Funky Sonatas is a celebration of musical fusion. It's all about infusing classical rhythms and Latin music. For more information, please visit terryheimer.com/funkysonatas. So that was some trending album news on the Weekend Jazz Update with Stan Silva. We're going for a short break. We'll be right back after that. When we come back, we're going to be talking about some of Mose Allison's best albums and compositions of all time. Stay tuned. And this is the Weekend Jazz Update with Joshua Silva. On this week's episode, Mose Allison, his life and times and best hits. During this hour, we're going to be talking about some of his best albums and compositions of all time. Here's a quick recap of what's coming up. To start off with an album called Backcountry Suite, released in 1957. The album plays out in country, blues and bop traditions. There's a beautiful composition that Mose Allison became famous for that he wrote for this album called Young Man's Blues. And this one's a song about the struggles that people go through in everyday life. Another album called Your Mind Is on Vacation. This album gives us a glimpse into 10 originals by Mose Allison like Swinging Machine, as well as some beautiful renditions of jazz classics like I Can't See for Looking. Another album called Alice in Wonderland. So this album combines some of his best hits from over 40 years, from 1957 to 1989. The album offers us a glimpse into its style in all its formats, from up-tempo pieces to slower ones, duo performances and trio performances. And an album called Wild Man on the Loose. This album sees Mose Allison working with a piano trio setting on most of the songs. Also there's a great instrumental, Powerhouse, one of the best instrumentals that Allison ever recorded. Also very smooth vocal performances on the album. So that was a quick insight into what's coming up during this hour, and this is the Weekend Jazz Update with Joshua Silva. We're going for a short break, we'll be right back after that. Stay tuned. And welcome back to the Weekend Jazz Update with Joshua Silva. On this week's episode, Mose Allison, his life and times and best hits. During this hour, we're going to be talking about some of his best albums and compositions of all time. To start off with, an album called Backcountry Suite, released in 1957. This was Allison's very first recording. On this album there's just two vocals, Young Man Blues and One Room Country Shack, very memorable songs. Also there's a great glimpse into his unique piano style on the song Backcountry Blues. This one's a 10-piece musical suite, played out in a country, blues and bop tradition. Joining him on the album is bassist Taylor Lafargue and drummer Frankie Sola. This album cemented Allison's status as a unique interpreter of American music styles. It's basically a series of dance sketches served up in blues and jazz styles. Some of the features of his first album were his remarkable timing, sensitive piano style and a deep understanding of jazz and blues. There's a beautiful composition that Mose Allison became famous for that he wrote for this album called Young Man's Blues. The song incorporates blues and jazz themes. Like many of his songs, this one's got a touch of moodiness, and this song's a song about the struggles that people go through in everyday life. The song paints a contrast between the good old days and the modern times when young men are in the blues despondent and without hope. The song talks about how young men of this world have little prospects in life. So this song was actually a commentary on American society at the time, a song about the new generations that were struggling to find a foothold in the society at the time. The song is a very popular classic and has been recorded by several other artists, from the Foo Fighters to Joe Bonamassa. Also there was a cover of this song that became the soundtrack to a 1970 documentary called Message to Love. Another album called Your Mind Is on Vacation. Remarkably, this album was Mose Allison's only recording during the years 1973 to 1981. There's also appearances of instrumentalists like Jack Hanna and David Sanborn on the tracks. So this album gives us a glimpse into 10 originals by Mose Allison like Swinging Machine, as well as some beautiful renditions of jazz classics like I Can't See for Looking. Another album called Alice Wonderland. Several people have hailed Allison's lyrics and songwriting in high regard for his ability to weave irony very creatively in the lyrics. He was also a very talented bop pianist who typically wove blues and gospel music into his style. So this album compiled some of his best hits from over 40 years, from 1957 to 1989. The album offers us a glimpse into his style in all its formats, from up-tempo pieces to slower ones, duo performances and trio performances. Some of the highlights: Backcountry Blues, Parchment Farm, Western Man and Ever Since the World Ended. Overall, an essential introduction to Allison's catalogue, and an album called Wild Man on the Loose. This album sees Mose Allison working with a piano trio setting on most of the songs, one of his best albums. Bassist Earl May gives us some very solid inventive music. Drummer legend Paul Motian is very straightforward and swinging on the rhythms. The two of them provide the perfect backdrop to Allison's piano melodies. Some of the tracks have a Duke Ellington vibe. Also there's a great instrumental, Powerhouse, one of the best instrumentals that Allison ever recorded. Also very smooth vocal performances on the album. So that was some insight into some of Mose Allison's best albums and compositions of all time, and this is the Weekend Jazz Update with Joshua Silva. Welcome back to the Weekend Jazz Update with Joshua Silva. On this week's episode, Mose Allison, his life and times and best hits. Now it's time for some trending album news. Acclaimed vocalist Kim McGuire has released a great single for the holiday season, My Favorite Things. The track blends theatre, dance and jazz. And this is a tribute to Kim's prowess in all three disciplines. The unique blend of jazz with theatre is an outstanding feature of this album. Collaborating with her on the track are John Hanson on piano, Chris Simon on bass, Susan Pascal on vibraphone and Matt Jorgensen on drums. The track went up for grabs on December 4th and is available on all streaming platforms. So this track also has its roots in Kim's theatre background. One of the verses in the song was written by her. It's also loosely based on the same song from The Sound of Music. It's basically an a cappella remix of the song from the movie. So this song plays out as a jazz waltz. Kim hails from Minneapolis and studied acting and music. Her training included the Broadway stage and prominent regional theaters. Today, she's carved a reputation for herself as a leading jazz vocalist and pianist and has performed at leading concert venues. My Favorite Things is also a prelude to even greater things to come. She's working on an electronic play that will be released later in 2025. The EP will feature several great tracks like A Lullaby of Birdland, But Beautiful, Sunny, and more. For more information, please visit www.kimmaguirejazz.com. So that was some trending album news on the Weekend Jazz Update with Jashani Silva. We're going for a short break. We'll be right back after that. When we come back, we're